Čakajú, že poďme presne.
Dobre. To je tá výhoda, že sú tu.
Takže to možno znovu.
Áno. Ale to už je to skončení, ale tlačové konferencie, preto tam bolo do druhé, ale určite nebude to vedieť. Dobrý deň. Vítajte na tlačovej konferencii Medzinárodného menového fondu. IMF každoročne navštevuje krajiny, aby preskúmali ekonomiky a tieto návštevy
of the IMF's 2026 Article 4 consultation with the Slovak Republic. These press conferences are a regular part of the IMF outreach efforts here in Slovakia and also in other countries. Let me start by introducing myself and also my colleagues. As was said, my name is Magnusa Saxegaarda. I'm the IMF's mission chief to Slovakia. To my left, I've got Shinya Kotera, and then to my right, I've got Yen Mui and Leonardo Indrapolo. Let me also start by thanking the Slovak this year's Article 4 consultation. Let me now say a few words about the process moving forward. The concluding statement you've received today summarizes the preliminary findings of the mission and will be published shortly on the IMF's website. After this, we will return to Washington, D.C. to prepare the full staff report, which will be discussed by the IMF's Executive Board on March 16th. Will be published a few days thereafter. Let me give you a very brief overview of our findings. Economic activity slowed significantly in 2025, reflecting a combination of necessary fiscal consolidation and elevated global uncertainty. For 2026, we expect growth to remain subdued at around 0.9%. Another year of fiscal consolidation and a cooling labour market are some of the factors likely to keep growth subdued. Over the medium term, growth is projected to remain well below Slovakia's pre-pandemic average, underscoring the importance of reforms to lift productivity. Risks to the outlook are tilted to the downside. Globally, heightened trade tensions and geopolitical uncertainty could weaken exports and investment and raise energy prices. Domestically, delays in fiscal consolidation or slower absorption of EU funds could undermine confidence and dampen growth. Turning to fiscal policy, credible and sustained fiscal consolidation is essential to rebuild buffers and safeguard macroeconomic stability. We project the headline deficit to reach 4.4% of GDP in 2026 from 5% of GDP in 2025. Our assessment is that the amount of fiscal consolidation in the 2026 budget is broadly appropriate and strikes a reasonable balance between avoiding a further weakening of the economy and fiscal consolidation. Looking ahead, fiscal adjustment will need to continue beyond 2026. Achieving the authority's deficit target of reducing the deficit to 2.8% of GDP by 2028 will require additional measures, and further adjustment will be needed over the longer term to address aging-related spending pressures and ensure debt sustainability. Turning to the financial sector, the banking sector remains resilient, but the economic slowdown calls for continued vigilance. In that context, our assessment is that the current macroprudential stance is broadly appropriate. Continued momentum in implementing recommendations from the IMF's 2025 Financial Sector Assessment Programme will be important to preserve financial stability. Finally, growth-enhancing workforce participation, addressing skill shortages, strengthening innovation and technology adoption, improving access to risk capital, and deepening integration in the EU single market. Strengthening governance and ensuring secure and affordable energy supply will also be key to lifting Slovakia's medium-term growth potential. With that, I would be happy to take your questions.
Hi there, my name is Vladimir Emrich. I'm a reporter with the Slovak online news outlet Aktuality.sk. I was wondering, in your baseline scenario, you say that you don't expect further fiscal consolidation in 2027 and beyond, yet you mentioned that there is a necessity of fiscal consolidation in order to stabilize that burden. How did you come to the conclusion that is included in your baseline scenario? Is it something that, sort of developed while you were talking to Slovak authorities?
Thank you for that question. It is the practice of the IMF, I would say, in most countries, to only take into account fiscal consolidation measures announced by the authorities when these measures are well defined and specified. That's why we forecast on that, because measures to reach those targets have not been specified. In other words, our 2027 forecast does not assume that there will be fiscal consolidation is not.
Overall, in your talks, did you get the sense that the authorities were indeed working on a fiscal consolidation plan for 2027?
The authorities put out consolidation targets that go all the way until 2028. And throughout our discussions, not only this year, but also during previous years, we've been impressed by the authorities where there is an increased risk of delays.
Boris Novotnak from Slovak Radio and Television. I would like to ask about your projections and also recommendations that you recommend here in this paper. What would you recommend to Slovakia to keep up with fiscal consolidation and maybe to go further and go down with?
Authorities have made significant fiscal progress on fiscal few years, and that has contributed to moving forward. We find both the deficit targets for 2028 that the authorities have specified. We find those to be appropriate given the fiscal risks that the authorities we do this year is we also say explicitly that even though we believe meeting the deficit target in 2028 will put debt on a downward trajectory, which is what the authorities have committed to do, beyond 2028, and particularly spending pressures related to aging, higher interest costs, and so on, which are going to put upward pressure on the deficit and will require further fiscal consolidation. We've put forward a proposal on ways to achieve that consolidation in a way which we believe will minimize the impact on the economy in the short run, while supporting long-term growth and also protecting the most vulnerable. We see scope for raising indirect taxes, but I would note that we do not think there is significant scope to raise direct taxes on labor and businesses, given that those are already high, and further increases could undermine competitiveness. But we do think there is scope to raise indirect taxes, for example, by reducing VAT exemptions that benefit a broad part of the population, not only those that necessarily need them. We believe there is scope to raise significant revenue from property taxes. Property taxes are one of the least harmful economically taxes that we have. We also believe there is significant scope.
Daniel Hodniak, Bloomberg News. I'd like to ask maybe beyond this report, because it's very clear and straightforward, if you could maybe comment on the political risks in Slovakia, how do you see it, and also from the point of view of foreign investments to Slovakia, because that was always like a huge factor for Slovakia to develop, to attract foreign investment. If you think this aspect changes in time and how it evolves, if Slovakia is still attractive.
Slovakia is a country, in particular on the car industry, which depends on. That requires maintaining a sound governance framework, which I think the authorities recognize this. On improvements that we believe can be made, and we've had very constructive discussions with the government on these recommendations.
Based on what you see right now with Slovak economics, would you say that Slovakia is going to adjust to the same ratings as it has today, or is it on upward trajectory or downward trajectory, based on what you see and what you find out?
I don't want to speculate on future changings to Slovakia's debt rating. What I think everybody recognizes, certainly within the government, is that Slovakia is facing a challenging period over the next decade or two because the increasing spending pressures related to aging. And unless fiscal consolidation is done, that will put pressure on the Slovak economy. And I think the authorities are firmly committed, and they recognize this. They are firmly committed.
You see for Slovakia government and Slovakian deficit in future years, and maybe for year 2026.
Section, those risks would also have an impact on the fiscal deficit. First, there are a number of external risks, which that it is a very open economy that is reliant on exports. Here, one of the first ones is obviously the increase in the recent year, and a renewed escalation of that. I think what's worthwhile noting here is that we've been positively surprised by how resilient the Slovak economy has been in the face of these tensions so far. But clearly, further escalations of trade tensions, and not only that, geopolitical instability, and could also raise energy prices, which would push up inflation. Domestically, as I mentioned previously, we recognize Slovakia is entering a period of elections, and so there is clearly a risk of delays to fiscal consolidation. If so, that would put upward pressure on yields and could slow down the economy. And then I think the last one that we mention as well is that Slovakia has been historically very reliant on energy imports from Russia, and the phasing out of those energy imports could temporarily push up energy prices until Europe reconfigures its energy infrastructure, and that could push upward pressure on inflation in the short run. But on the other hand, we believe that this is a much needed investment by the Slovak authorities in order to ensure a secure and reliable energy supply also in the future.
Ďakujem vám pekne za účasť a prajeme vám ešte pekný deň. Materiály sa už na